Hey guys, David Small here from Team Small Robots, and today we have an event report from Motorama 2022 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So let's jump right in. So my first bot to fight is Gimli, my 150 gram vertical spinner, which actually I don't think I've talked about on this channel since Motorama of 2018, which was about 4 years ago. That version managed to get third place, so hopefully I can beat that this time around. If you compare the two versions side by side, you can see that there are a fair amount of differences. The newer version has a new blade that's 10 grams heavier, putting it now at 30 grams, as well as a new wedge, and the entire thing is printed out of nylon bridge instead of onyx. Most of the losses for this robot happens when it gets stuck on its face and does the thing. It can't self-right and then I get counted out. This has been totally fixed in the new version, and it self-rights with no problem with this new big motor. If there's enough interest, I can make an entire video on Gimli and talk about the parts inside of it and how it was made. So if that sounds like something that'll interest you, feel free to leave a comment. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the fights. So Gimli's first fight of the day is against a jack-o'-lantern themed undercutter named Jack. As the match starts off, I see I did a great job sharpening my wedges as I'm unable to drive across the floor seam in the middle. I land a nice big hit on Jack, sending him flying across the arena, and then drive over to continue beating on him. After a few more little hits, I land a nice big roof shot that bounces him off the ceiling and rips off his undercutter weapon. Then after that, he immediately taps out, and Gimli wins his first fight. While not very apparent from the video, Jack actually did a fair amount of damage to the extrusions that hold onto the wedge. You can see right here it cracked where the screw holds the wedge down. There just wasn't enough material around the hole. But this can easily be fixed in a future version by adding more meat. My short-term solution to this was to just take a hot soldering iron and just kind of rub it around the outer edge of the border of the crack and then squish everything together and hope that everything bonds again. Not ideal, but this is what I went with. Gimli's next match was against a wedge bot named Africa by Toto, built by the wedge lord himself, Nate Franklin. Nate's driving skill combined with the durability of his robot led me to believe that this fight was going to go the full 3 minutes before it even started. Because of that, I was really babying the throttle of my weapon. I didn't want to lose by having the battery die with only 20 seconds left, since the battery life really hadn't been tested yet. But my nice sharp wedge seems to be doing a great job of winning the ground game, and I'm able to self-right with the weapon no problem, not doing the thing anymore. So all's going well. Even at only like 25% weapon throttle, I'm still able to send him up in the air pretty decently and land some nice hits. The rest of the match pretty much continued just like this, where I land little hit after little hit, and after a lot of baby hits, the match was over, and it went to a judge's decision where Gimli won. Inspecting the damage on his robot, you can see that Gimli did a pretty decent job bending up the wedges on the front of the robot. I really wished I cranked the weapon up to really see what it could do though. Now, this event only has 6 robots in it, so these 2 wins guarantee that I'll get at least 3rd place. So right off the bat, I have tied with my personal best, but with any luck, I'll be able to beat it. But standing in the way is Brother Nero, a lifter bot built by Brandon Nichols. Brother Nero's scoop was very low to the ground, and I had a really hard time getting underneath it. More times than not, his scoop would get underneath me, and he would deflect the blows of my vertical spinner, sending me flying backwards. It felt like he was winning the majority of these exchanges, until I landed a few hits in a row that started to really beat up the scoop on his robot. After that, it was very easy for my wedge to get underneath his, and I won the ground game pretty much every time. With the scoop bent out of commission, Brandon decided to call it there and tapped out, giving Gimli another win. A quick look at his bot after the match showed that Gimli really did a number on his scoop. But with another win under Gimli's belt, that means it is now in the finals. For the final match of the tournament, Gimli was up against Brother Nero, again! He made his way through the loser's bracket, so now we have to fight once more. Since I was fighting someone I had just beat, I decided to run the weapon a little bit higher than I had in the past. I was landing much bigger hits obviously, sending him higher up into the air and doing more damage. After a few hits, his drive started to act a little bit wonky, and even pieces of his scoop started to fall apart. It wasn't long before the damage was too much, and he tapped out once again. And with that, Gimli wins first place in the ferryweight division.
Congratulations to David Small and Gimli!
So for day 2 of Motorama, I have my hobbyweight drum spinner robot, Son of Cram. I realize now that I didn't take a picture of the robot before the event, so this picture of it upside down is going to have to do. It's the least spoilery photo that I have. After its debut at Norwalk in July of last year, I changed the frame from aluminum to one made out of plastic and 3D printed TPU. You can see that the drum stack is actually bolted together now instead of just using dowel pins, so hopefully that holds together better. Son of Cram's first fight is against War Hard XL, built by the team behind War Easy on BattleBots. This match was an absolute slugfest and it was a ton of fun. It was great that my weapon wasn't falling apart and I was able to keep dishing out hits without it breaking. The big mistake I made this entire fight was keeping my weapon throttle down. I was losing the tip engagements because his blade was spinning so much faster than mine. One issue I'm now noticing is that it's very hard to tell if my robot is right side up or not, since it's just black on both the top and the bottom. I ended up adding a sticker to the top of the robot after this fight so I knew which way was up. Another big problem is the center of gravity on the robot. There's so much weight in the front that the robot really wants to tip forward. This problem is magnified by the skis in the front of the robot that I use for ground game purposes. I wanted them to just ride just above the ground, but because of the squish in the wheels, they actually rub against the ground too much, and that causes traction problems because the wheels don't get to engage as much as they should. So the robot isn't quite driving as nice as I'd like it to. Every time there was a big hit, I'd be worried that that was it and my drum would stop working, but it kept going, and I couldn't be happier with how well it was doing. During the last 30 seconds though, I was able to land a nice series of pops that kept him upside down and then slam him over into the corner. While he was pinned, I was able to grind into his top plate, left lots of pretty sparks and was pretty cool. But I wasn't able to do very much damage. Then after pinning him in the corner, I did my best to try to land another big hit, but ended up running out of time. The match went the distance, and the winner was War Hard by a split judge's decision. And I'd have to agree. While the last 30 seconds were definitely in my favor, the rest of the match definitely went to War Hard. So now it was time to take the robot back to the pits and take a look at the damage. Both the drive and the weapon were still working. Most of the damage, as you can see, was just done to the front of the chassis. He pretty much grinded away all of the soft material that covers these bolts on the front. On the right side, he even reached the bolt itself and ripped it out of the frame. One thing I'd like to mention real quick is the difference in performance I got from using different plastics in Son of Cram. During the Norwalk finals in December, I ran Son of Cram with black UHMW. That's the version shown in the picture here. You can see in the bottom right corner that when the material gets hit by a spinner, it bends and even cracks. This isn't the result I wanted. What I wanted instead was for spinners to just scoop out chunks of it, like ice cream almost with a spoon. This is when I learned that black UHMW is actually mostly recycled, and whatever material they add to the composite to make it black in color actually makes it more brittle. So switching over to white HDPE was much more gummy, and I got sort of the ice cream effect that I wanted from spinners hitting it. Some of the pieces on Son of Cram are still black UHMW though, like this shoulder piece in the back. You can see how it cracked upon impact. On the other hand, I'm extremely impressed with how well the TPU side panels are holding up. They're basically 3/4 of an inch of just pure rubber, and even after taking direct hits from his drum, there's hardly any damage to show for it. So there wasn't a lot of work to be done. Pretty much just had to charge the batteries, clean up the HDPE a little bit, and then sand down the front skis so that it rode less on them and more on the wheels. So Son of Cram's next fight was against Huge. That's UGE, which is obviously based off of Huge and built by one of Huge's team members. I was very scared going into this fight, but in the first 2 seconds I noticed how much better my drive was, and I was able to weave around him and land hits on the wheels without hitting the blade. The robot drifts really well around the arena now, so I can circle around him and then come in and make a hit when I think it's safe. This ended up being my strategy for the majority of the fight. I also got a nice lucky lineup and was able to shove him across the arena. Being able to push a robot like Huge across the arena is something that doesn't happen very often. Huge also tended to gyro a lot, which made it easier to outmaneuver his weapon and be able to strike the wheel that was touching the ground while the blade was higher up. Every once in a while I would mess up though, and 1 or 2 times he did land a nice big blow on my top armor, sending out nice pretty white sparks from the titanium. This tactical approach was working well, but I wanted to show a little bit more aggression and damage. I went for his blade and noticed that I was kind of winning the weapon-on-weapon hits, so I rammed him at full speed and popped him into the air a few times. Being a little less scared of his weapon now, I decided to just go head on if I had the momentum. I got a little too overconfident though, and he did some damage to my top armor and took out one of my belts, so my drive was limited on one side. After that I decided to go back to trying to tactically go around and hit his wheels instead. Then right when there was only 3 seconds left, he got this shot in that took out my weapon belt. But then the match ended before my weapon could spin down, so I don't think the judges knew that I had lost my drum. This fight was a little bit closer than one might think. I wasn't really sure how the damage that Huge did to me would compare to the aggression and control I was showing, so I didn't really know how it would turn out. After some deliberation, the judges talked it over, and the winner was Son of Cram. This was an awesome fight, and probably my favorite fight from the entire event. So typically I just go over the highlights in these event recaps, but if you want to watch the whole fight, I'll have the links to all of them in the description. So taking it back to the pits, the biggest piece of damage was the back left wheel. The foam was almost completely removed and the hub itself was in pretty bad shape. Of course, there was the belt that was sniped at the end, and the top part of the skis were just deleted. Then of course, since Huge is an overhead weapon that attacks from above, there's a lot of damage to the top plates. He gave me some nice big gouges here on the top of the robot just above the gearbox. He actually did a lot of damage to the hex screws on the top of the robot, so I wasn't able to take the robot apart. To fix this, I took it to the back and used a grinder to cut these little slots into the screws and then use a flathead screwdriver to take the screws out. After getting inside the robot, I noticed that this gash would have taken out the gearbox if it was only a 1/4 inch or so more towards the inside of the robot, so that was pretty lucky that he missed. Then lastly, he took one of these bolts in the back of the robot and made it very unbolt shaped. So now it is the 3rd day of the event. Since I had a little bit of time before my next fight, I decided to fix one of my wheels that had a chunk taken out of it. So I used the chunk that was remaining from the wheel that Huge destroyed, cut it roughly into the shape of the chunk that was removing from another wheel, and then hot glued them together to make one completed wheel. I learned that I'd be fighting a wedge bot in my next fight, so I decided to give up on the ground game and just switch to my anti-horizontal skis. These are made out of TPU and are also 100% infill. These also had the same problem of being too tall, and the wheels weren't able to push firmly against the ground, but that was nothing that a little bit of time with a flap disc and an angle grinder couldn't fix. Now Son of Cram is up against His and Hers, which is a multi-bot made out of 2 6-pound wedges. I'd like to apologize for the lagginess in this video. This is the raw stream video, but since it was lagging during its broadcast, it also lags during the playback, so it's just going to be choppy like this the entire time. I think it was a good call not to try and play the ground game here. Since my drum is so low to the ground, I would drive up their wedge and then it would engage and I'd send them flying backwards. And since each robot is only 6 pounds, they fly back really far on normal hits. Every once in a while though, one would get under me, and I even got slammed into the wall a few times. But shortly after, I'd recover and then attack again. The rest of this fight was pretty much me driving around, getting as many big hits as I could, and trying to take out their sections of drive. I think eventually all 3 robots ended up having drive problems, and I wasn't sure what caused that in mine. But in the end, it was a judge's decision, and the winner was Son of Cram. After taking the robot back to the pits, I found the source of the problem. It's a little hard to see in this picture, but the belt actually carved a little groove in the TPU side panel, and then slipped off through the groove that it made. So to fix this in the future, I'm going to have to add a metal plate, or something less resistant to being worn down, to keep the belt in place. But we were reaching the point in the tournament where there wasn't really a lot of time for repair work, so I just kind of wrapped tape around the groove and hoped for the best. Then I went over to His and Hers to check out the damage to their robots. Looks like the scoops and the wedges were bent up pretty bad on both. I was also able to rip off the side wheel guards on the red one, which was pretty cool. Now Son of Cram is once again fighting War Hard, who made it a few rounds in the winner's bracket but then lost, and now joins me in the loser's bracket and has to fight me once again. Feeling a little bit better about my weapon reliability, I cranked it up a little bit, and then after taking a big pop, I cranked it up even more. Then I started to win some of these exchanges. Just like our last fight, it was a brutal back and forth with lots of big hits on both sides. There came one point in the match where I flipped him over. So I throttled down my weapon and tried to just do little hits so that I wouldn't accidentally flip him back over, since he wasn't able to drive or fight inverted very well. After about half a minute of that though, he gets popped back up on his feet, and it goes back to a regular back and forth. Eventually I get flipped over as well, but since I'm perfectly symmetrical, I'm able to drive and fight just fine while upside down, though I'm just punching downwards instead of upwards. Driving upside down is definitely something I need to practice more. I also noticed that his weapon starts to fade in and out. Sometimes it's off, sometimes it's on. Maybe the motor's cogging, I'm not really sure, but sometimes I just tap it and it stops moving completely, which is good for me. He does get it back to full speed eventually though, and gives me a nice pop, sending me flying through the air. The hit seems to have done some damage to his weapon though, and he's having trouble spinning it again. Then it's my turn to land a juicy hit as I send him flying onto his back. But unfortunately that shot also took out my belt, and we're both kind of weaponless, but I think he might be dead, so I wait for him to move. Looks like he's still alive though, so I come in to shove him around some more. Then the rest of the match just kind of turned into this awkward pushing battle. Eventually it goes to a judge's decision where Son of Cram is declared unanimously as the winner. I didn't really take any damage on my robot, but on War Hard you can see that Son of Cram left some nice juicy gashes and slashes into the weapon. Up next, Son of Cram is against a cool gyro walker named Kitten Mittens, which is built by Luke Quintal of the Copperhead team. Since he's a gyro walker with no wheels, he gets a weight bonus, which means I'm fighting a robot that weighs 18 pounds instead of 12 pounds. Since he is a walker though, I'm able to easily outmaneuver him and get to the side. I tore the side hatch open and left all these juicy wires exposed. So now all I had to do was go around and hit him in that same exact spot and hopefully take out some of his guts. But unfortunately, all I did was hit him up into the air and cause his weapon to collide with mine. This sent a massive impact into my own robot, and I just stopped moving entirely. I then get counted out, and the winner is Kitten Mittens by KO. I even got to get one more look at all the guts hanging out of Kitten Mittens as he made his way back towards the door, just begging to be ripped out. But oh well. So with that, Son of Cram is given 4th place in the entire event, and Kitten Mittens is guaranteed at least 3rd. I was very curious to see what caused the problem, so I took the robot apart and took a look at all the components inside. It turns out that the receiver was the issue. The G-forces from that big impact broke it. I swapped it out for a new one, and the entire robot worked just fine. The receiver was just hot glued in place, so I guess in the next version I'm going to have to wrap it in foam or soft mount it in some way so that this doesn't happen again. Now, Son of Cram is out of the tournament, but it still won a trophy.
Okay, best driver. Son of Cram. An impressive performance in his fight against Ooch.
Motorama is a massive event with a ton of robots and builders and drivers, so it was a huge honor to receive this, and I'm very thankful for it. And with that, Motorama 2022 came to a close. I had an awesome time as always, and I'm very happy with how the robots did. I can't wait to come back next year with even better robots. If you'd like to see more of my robots and more videos about them, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. For more updates, check out my Facebook page, facebook.com/TeamSmallRobots. And with that, I'll see you next time. Oh, and Highlander was there too, but he got wrecked by Absurditai.